So we are here on the record for People versus Michael Birch for a sentencing, and we have some victims who were at the time of a younger age. They have requested, or actually for this to be placed on streaming, typically do not stream a sentence or any case involving a minor child victim, but with their request and permission, we are now streaming. All right, thank you. Mrs. House, your first victim impact statement?
Yes, Your Honor. You can see her. Ms. Mosier is here via Zoom, and she would like to speak first.
All right, Ms. Mosier, I can read your name, but please state it for the record.
Tara Mosier.
Would you please spell both?
Tarahmosier.
Yes, ma'am. And what is it you'd like to say today?
I wrote a something.
It's all right, take your time.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you, Judge, for letting me speak here today. Also, thank you to Aaron House and Detective Maslin for your kindness and support through this process. My name is Tara Mosier. I was born in 1994 and I'm 31 years old. In 1999, I was removed from the care of my biological parents by Children and Family Services and placed in the care of my aunt. The defendant, Michael Birch, is legally my cousin, but I grew up with him as though he were my older brother. I refer to my aunt as my mother and Michael as my brother. Our household consisted of myself, Michael, his mother, and her wife. Despite multiple referrals to CPS regarding the conditions in our home, the system failed to protect me. I was also failed by my aunt, who was supposed to be my caretaker. I grew up in an environment of instability, neglect, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and substance abuse. Life in our household was chaotic and unstable. Around the 3rd or 4th grade, we were evicted from our home. From then on, where we slept varied constantly. We lived with friends, families, in motels, tents, campers at campgrounds. Most of my childhood was consumed with worries about food, shelter, and how to appear normal at school, despite living in such unstable conditions. At school, I learned to be quiet and blend in. School became my escape from the chaos at home. When we lived in campgrounds, we often moved every 2 weeks. When we lived in motels, I shared a bed with Michael. The lack of protection and lack of supervision enabled me to be perpetrated by multiple individuals, including my cousin, Michael Birch. The sexual abuse committed by Michael that I endured consisted of oral sex.
What you're hearing right now is not just a victim impact statement. It's a complete breakdown of how a system, a household, and the adults who were supposed to protect a child all failed at once. This case spans decades, multiple victims, and a pattern that didn't stop until someone finally spoke up and was believed. And as hard as this is to hear, what comes next exposes just how deep the damage really goes.
Penetration on one occasion, and years of molestation, which began at around the ages of 7 or 8. This abuse continued into my teenage years, often while I was asleep. When we shared a room, I would hear Michael masturbating in the bed at night. When we shared a bed, I would try to sleep as far away from him as possible with my body close to the wall and my back to him. I would often awake to him grabbing my butt and my hips, trying to pull me closer to him and touching my private parts. I will never forget the night he used his hands to guide my head down to give him oral sex. And I certainly will never forget the night our parents left us at home alone, and Michael had taken me to our parents' room and showed me porn. I had never seen porn before. After we watched porn, he brought me to where we slept, told me to get naked and lay on the ground, and then got on top of me and penetrated me with his penis into my vagina. I remember being so cold, confused, and anxious as to what was happening. I was in shock. I laid so still and just stared outside and fixated on the moon. I will never forget that night. I was about 10 or 11 years old, and I was so young I hadn't even started my period yet. My innocence was taken and my trust in men completely shattered. I was in elementary school and was so young. The sexual abuse of him molesting me in my sleep continued until I was a teenager and always while I was asleep. The times I lived separate from him and my aunt were my best childhood memories. On 2 separate occasions, I was also molested by other men. In 2007, around the age of 13, I gathered the courage to tell my aunt about those incidents. I remember her saying, "What do you want me to do about it?" She believed I was seeking attention. Because she did not believe me about those men, I did not tell her about what Michael had done and would continue to do to me throughout the next few years. If she didn't believe me about the other men, she certainly wouldn't believe me about her youngest son. I would ask myself, who would believe me? What would people think of me? As I got older, I placed the blame on myself a lot. Why couldn't I just be brave enough to say something to someone, anyone? Why did I let this continue on for so long? I lived in fear, embarrassment, and silence. I blamed myself for not speaking up sooner, but I was a child, confused, scared, and ashamed. The normalcy of this being my life had numbed me. Michael was both protective and sexually abusive, which made my feelings even more conflicted. Sherry, Michael's mom, was hardly ever nice to me, and I did not feel safe to tell her. The secrecy and shame weighed heavily on me, and I carried it alone for years. Even today, certain memories and triggers bring me back to those moments, reminding me of the pain and fear I endured. In 2009, I began attending church with friends from school. Church became my safe place where I experienced compassion, kindness, and love, unlike anything I had known at home. I always sought my aunt's approval and love by getting good grades, picking up the house, or buying her books, but it was never enough. I looked up to women in the youth ministry as motherly figures, and their support gave me strength. In 2011, at age 17, one of the youth leaders asked about my home life. For the first time, I opened up about being homeless, the drug use in the house, and the sexual abuse. Michael had recently moved back into the house, and I no longer wanted to be a victim. I wanted to be as far away from Michael as possible and didn't care where I went. Sharing my secret was terrifying, but also a relief. She responded with so much compassion, but I also saw the horror in her eyes. She reported my situation to CPS. When CPS confronted my aunt, Michael lied about what he had done and said I was making it up.
This moment is critical. Legally speaking, delayed disclosure is extremely common in child sexual abuse cases, and courts recognize that fear, dependence, and disbelief often silence victims for years. What Tara describes here isn't hesitation, it's survival. When a child reports abuse and is dismissed, the law understands that silence afterward isn't consent or uncertainty, it's trauma. And the emotional conflict she describes, seeing an abuser as both protector and predator, is something judges and prosecutors take very seriously when evaluating credibility.
As my fears were confirmed, my aunt became furious and accused me of lying. My aunt claimed I was mixing things up with previous people who had taken advantage of me. She believed I was lying about Michael to gain attention. I thought if Sherry didn't believe me, then no one else in my family would. Despite her denial, I was removed from our home that day. Although I felt abandoned by my family, I was finally free from the abuse. My life would be completely different today if I had not found compassion and support during my teenage years. It only takes one person showing kindness to change the trajectory of someone's life. The damage Michael caused continues to burden me. I am hypervigilant. I sleep on the edge of the bed without reason. I am a light sleeper. I have struggled with intimacy and trust. For years, I condemned every man, assuming their intentions were harmful. I still have little trust in men. I struggled to bond with my new legal guardian in high school despite his kindness because of the scars Michael left. I am uncomfortable with physical touch and often assume people have ill intentions. These are the consequences of Michael's actions. Because of him, I once believed I was unworthy of love or of having children. It took me years to overcome that belief. Through faith in Jesus, I found grace and love. I have found a caring man who I intend to marry and with whom I hope to raise children. I will teach them right from wrong and how to treat women with respect. I will love them. I will give them the love and safety and advocacy I never received. For years, I tried to forget what Michael had done. I never imagined he would harm others, but I was naive. When I learned of his abuse of Marcia, I felt both comfort and anger. Comfort because I was not alone, but anger because he continued to hurt others. I fear for other women and girls who are around Michael. I am grateful that Marcia did not wait as long as I did to tell her story. I believe that given the opportunity, he would have taken it further with Marcia and continued the abuse. Her courage reminds me that speaking out matters, not only for ourselves, but for the protection of others. To Marcia, I am so sorry that this happened to you. If I can go back in time and take Michael to court to have him listed as a registered sex offender and serve time in prison, I would. You are so brave for telling your mother what happened to you. I hope you can feel a sense of justice today and can heal. I envy the love, safety, and advocacy you received from your mother that I never received from my own. May there be more mothers like her in this world. To Michael, my memories of you are difficult to process. I have good memories of us playing with Hot Wheels, going on bike rides, playing with kids in the neighborhood, and building forts. But those memories are forever intertwined with darker ones. You were my brother, and I trusted you. You were supposed to be my protector. In a household of women, you were supposed to be a leading example of how men should act and treat women. You have no idea what it was like for me to finally feel brave enough to speak about my abuse, only to be dismissed and disbelieved by your mother, the woman who raised me. At 17 years old, I carried the burden of silence my entire life. I felt forced to leave my family, and I still carry the sorrow of loss when others speak about their families or ask me about mine. You cannot know the pain of being ignored, judged, or ridiculed by family friends in public for the trauma I endured. I've often thought about why and how you knew about sex at such a young age. I will never know, and that's okay with me, and I feel sorry for you. But that is the only sympathy from me that you will ever receive. Despite what you had done to me, I do not hate you, but I wish to never see or hear from you again. You are part of my past and will never hurt me again. What you did to me and Marcia was wrong, dishonorable, and despicable. You knew it was wrong, that's why you hid it, lied about it, and targeted younger girls while they slept. Your actions have consequences, and no lies can erase them. I hope no one else will ever suffer at your hands, but time will tell. I've always waited for you to apologize, but as the years have passed, I've realized I may never receive one. I hope you regret what you did, not because you were caught, but because you truly understand the harm you caused. I hope you reflect on that while incarcerated. To conclude, it is so difficult to come forward about sexual abuse for fear of disbelief, a fear of judgment, disbelief, embarrassment, of reliving horrible memories we'd rather forget, and placing blame on the victim. I hope that all victims of sexual abuse find the courage to tell their stories and obtain justice. I do not believe people should be defined by the worst moments of their life, but Michael ruined my childhood and my innocence. Sometimes I wish I had never known him. Despite this, and despite the deep wounds I still carry, I believe all things happen for a reason. Living with his mother led me to church, where I found my voice and the courage to tell my story and try to move on. But there's no true moving on, because what he did to me I will carry with me forever. I share my story now to have a sense of closure and justice, and so the court understands the seriousness of what I endured, what Michael is capable of, the lifelong impact it's had on me, and the importance of holding Michael accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mosier. Ms. House?
Thank you. Marcia Spencer would like to speak now.
Ms. Spencer, you may approach.
And Your Honor, it's okay. She's gonna sit here at the table and we're gonna move up her way.
Okay. All right, please spell for me your first and last name.
MARSHASPENCER.
Yes, Ms. Spencer.
I'm here today because when I was 11 years old, sexually assaulted by Michael Birch. I wasn't sure how to start this. I avoided it. I ripped pages and pages out of my notebook. I won't ever be able to put into words what you did to me. Not physically, but mentally. I loved you. I trusted you. You're my favorite person. To me, you weren't just my mom's new boyfriend. You turned into the person I went to when I was scared, mad, or upset. I looked up to you. I remember when you came back from California, I was so excited to see you. You surprised me at cheer practice, and I ran and jumped into your arms, and all I could do was cry. I wish there was some way that I would have known what was going to happen, but it was so normal. It was normal that you asked me to sleep in the camper with you. So I did. I remember going to school the next day and not being able to participate in any of the class activities. All I could think about was what happened and if I should tell my mom or not. I came home that day and started doing my chores, and you decided to help me by standing behind me and hand over hand washing dishes with me. You asked me if I wanted to sleep in the camper with you again that night. I remember my heart just racing. I felt super hot and like I was going to be sick. I knew I needed to tell my mom, so I did. I got my phone, I texted my mom what had happened, and I stared at you sitting in the recliner in the corner of the living room while I was banging on the bathroom door waiting for my mom to answer. And she did, my mom made you leave, and I haven't seen you again until this year. Nothing happened to you. You were arrested and let out the next day. You ran, you disappeared because you knew what you did was wrong. You didn't stop there, you continued. Not only to torment me, but my family. You called my mom. You commented on family pictures on Facebook, calling me a liar and a whore. I suffered, not you. I had to relive this every time I looked in my own backyard. Every time I saw someone with red hair. Every time I saw someone wearing the brand Dickies. I remember going to counseling every week and I slept. I slept a lot. I didn't want to talk about it. So I slept to avoid questions. I was scared to sleep in my own bed. I didn't want to be away from my mom, but I also didn't want to be punched by her. But I wanted my mom to hold me while I cried. It felt disgusting every time I laid on my side and closed my eyes. It was like I was right back there again. And yes, I'm so angry. I spent the last 11 years wondering why. Not only why did you do this to me, but how are you getting away with it? I used to be scared to go to sleep at night because I would have dreams of you knocking on my window, saying you see me. Dreams of you coming to my school and stealing my little sister. I spent 11 years watching over my shoulder, always paying close attention to all the people around me. All the cars that slow down by me, I became scared of everything. All my male teachers, all male doctors, even male police officers made me uncomfortable to be around as I got older. I thought it would get better. This happened right before my birthday. It made me hate my birthdays. It was the most dreadful time of the year for me. It was like my body knew what happened. My dreams would get worse. And I would get sick. Now into high school, I had ended up missing a lot of school because I was always getting sick. I ended up losing the function of my legs, and the doctors chalked it up to a panic attack. After a few days of still not being able to walk, my mom took me to a different hospital and I was diagnosed with functional neurological disorder, which is caused by stress. I spent 2 weeks at a rehabilitation center having to relearn how to walk. You took so much from me. You were burned into my head. No matter how hard I tried to get you out, I couldn't. I stopped going to football games because one time I seen a male there that looked just like you and it sent me into a panic attack and my mom had to come pick me up. I had a teacher with red hair and I couldn't even look him in the eye. Most of the time I skipped class, or when I went, I often had a panic attack and would leave his classroom. I didn't graduate from high school, and I do blame you for that. School was hard for me. I never felt safe. Every lockdown, even if it was just a drill, I panicked. I always thought you were going to come back and hurt me or take my sister. I didn't go on dates as a teenager because I was scared of all males. I remember when my mom's husband asked me if I wanted to go in the store with him. I cried. I freaked out. I thought it was weird. I thought he was going to be like you. You took a lot from me in one night. I stopped doing a lot of things that I love. Now that I'm an adult, what you did still follows me. I still don't like to be touched. I still don't like when people stand behind me. I still have nightmares. I know that these horrible things probably happened to you when you were younger, but these things have also happened to me. I couldn't imagine doing something like this to someone else. I don't think that would ever happen to you when you were younger should excuse your behavior or make anyone feel bad for you. If these things happen to you, you know the mental harm that it does. I'll never understand why you did this to me or the other girls you have done this to. No excuse, no amount of time in prison can fix this. I just want to say I'm not one of your victims. I'm 22 years old. I have an amazing fiance and a beautiful daughter. I have a house that is filled with all the love and animals you can ever imagine. My sister, my beautiful baby sister, is so smart, beautiful, stubborn, strong, and so hard-headed. She is someone you will never get the privilege to know because she doesn't want to know you. You will never hear my voice or see my face again. I still struggle with physical touch, being in places alone, with sleeping, but I want you to know that you didn't ruin my family, you didn't ruin me. We are happy, we have good lives. I'm glad to say that I can finally put this behind me. You finally took accountability for what you did. Not only to me, but for other people you have done it to. Although I know this is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life, I can finally breathe. No more worrying you are out there doing this to another family. No more wondering how you got away with this. I hope you finally get what you deserve. I don't forgive you, and I don't think I ever will. You're a disgusting human being, a waste of space, and I believe people like you don't deserve a second chance. Because I don't get a second chance to go back and relive my childhood. I hope you now carry all the nightmares, the fear, the insecurities, and the shame that I've carried with me.
Thank you. Obviously, the mother still wishes to speak?
Yes, she does.
All right. Sarah? Make sure you spell your first and your last name for my court reporter, please.
SAURAHBELKIEWICZ.
And you're the mother of Marcia.
Yes.
You may speak.
I don't know where to start, but I am standing here today with my kids. The things Michael Birch did to my daughter Marcia have had a huge impact on all our lives. I watched my daughter, who was once a very happy, outgoing little girl that had the brightest smile on her face all the time, turn into a scared, unsecure little girl that grew into a young woman with many health and mental issues due to what he did to her. I watched as she changed her hair color many times so she wouldn't look the same. Marcia used to love to go camping, and after all of this, she couldn't be around pop-up campers and no longer wanted to go camping because she would have panic attacks. The panic attacks put her in the hospital many times, and after one of the worst times, she lost the use of her legs and couldn't walk. We were sent to a rehab in Grand Rapids where we found out she had developed functional neurological disorder due to stress that was caused by trauma. She was scared to be at school because kids would tease her and teachers would tell her to get over it and deal with it. This has followed all of us every day with bad dreams, countless tears, late nights telling my daughter everything would be okay and I would make sure she was safe. How can I tell her that everything would be fine and believe it after I let Michael into our home? I trusted him with my kids and I let him in my home. Michael and I had a little girl, Lacey. Marcia fell in love with her baby sister. They were always together. She always wanted to help with everything that had to do with her sister. They had a bond that I was in awe of. And after everything that happened, I watched that bond disappear. I watched two little girls lose each other. My heart broke all over again watching my girl go from best friends to just sisters. Before all of this happened, if you were to ask Marcia how she felt about Michael, she would have said that he was her dad. She would have said he is more of a dad to her than her own. They had a bond that was amazing. Michael came into my home, made us all think we were safe. He was a father figure to all my kids. He played video games with Thomas. He went fishing with Kevin, but Marcia was his favorite. After this happened, Marcia lost a piece of her that I hope one day she will get back. Lacey not only lost her dad, she lost her sister and lost the chance to grow up with her dad in her life. This caused many issues for her, and Lacey is a very closed off little girl that has had kids tease her because she doesn't have a dad. Over the years, she's had to wonder why her dad didn't love her enough to be here for her, and why did he touch her sister. Lacey knows what her dad did to her sister. That was a conversation I don't wish on my worst enemy. How do you tell your daughter that her dad isn't around because he touched her sister in a way no child should be touched? I know Lacey wants to know why. We all want to know why, but I don't think we will ever get to know the why. Parents are supposed to keep their kids safe, and everything has happened has made me question myself. Every decision, every choice, every person I allow around my kids, I find myself looking them up to see if they are safe. I have not processed everything, and I hope one day I can, but today I doubt everything and still think it is my fault because I let a monster around my kids. I do know that it is not my fault, but I still can't help that feeling that I get. So I hope he knows that what he did was wrong, and I hope that no one ever has to go through that, what my kids went through, what Tara went through because of him ever again.
I'll go ahead and take allocution from the government.
Thank you. I think that this case is an important reminder to all of us in the court system how even just a single incident of sexual abuse can change the lives of the victim and their entire family. I think it's also an important reminder that these are typically not isolated incidents. What we have heard here is that this defendant started perpetrating sexual assaults when he was a fairly young child, perpetrating them on his cousin who was raised as his sister. And then he went on to abuse this victim here when he became a part of her family when he was older. In this situation, he invites her to sleep in a camper with him when she's only 11 years old. She wakes up to him. She describes humping her from behind. He's basically laying up against her in a position that people sometimes talk about as spooning. She's described that he has his hand on her hip and is thrusting his penis up against her butt. She had the ability, probably because she knew she had a mother that would protect her and believe her, to tell him at that point that she was cold and she wanted to go inside, and she went inside. But he then prevented her from telling her mother at that point by following her into the house, then standing in the bedroom door for, they've told me, 20 or more minutes as the victim cried in her mother's bed, but couldn't tell what happened because he was standing there. The mother's telling him, I don't know what's going on, but you need to go back out to the camper and go to sleep. And he stands there until that child falls asleep. And then the next day he drives her to school and tells her that he loves her. And then that next night he asks her if she wants to sleep in the camper again. So these are very concerning incidents that started in the early 2000s and we know went up until 2015. I think it's important, and it's documented in the pre-sentence investigation report, that the defendant also has committed more recent acts of disturbing abuse against his current family. So it documents in there that he was married in March of 2021. He then was arrested August 30th of 2021 for an aggravated domestic battery against his wife, who he has a child with. It appears from reading that record that then while he is on bond for that offense that he committed in August of 2021, he gets arrested again on October 27th of 2021 for what's listed as an aggravated domestic battery strangulation charge on that same victim. And then is sentenced, convicted at that point of a felony, sentenced to serve, I believe it was 120 days in jail. And then he had some sort of suspended sentence that went on after that. This is a disturbing history, and I recognize that there probably are very disturbing things that happened to the defendant when he was a child. But what we know is that he's now done disturbing things to other people who don't go on to perpetrate that on other people. So what happened to him may be an explanation for some of what he does, but none of it is an excuse, and none of it is the cause of what he does. He is targeting young females. He tends to target them, it appears, when they're sleeping. He intentionally isolates them from other people. And then what's often most disturbing that they've both talked about today is that afterwards, when they try to speak up about it, he calls them liars and he calls them whores as a way to completely take no responsibility for what he did and completely discredit them, which not only does he do to try to get out of his own trouble, but then this causes this lasting harm to them where other people doubt them.
This is where the case shifts from individual tragedy to documented pattern. The prosecution isn't just recounting allegations, they're laying out a timeline of escalating behavior, isolation tactics, and repeated denial. In sentencing, pattern matters more than intent, excuses, or background. While the court may acknowledge the defendant's own past trauma, the law is clear: explanation is not excuse. What stands out here is that the victims chose a plea not for leniency, but to avoid being re-traumatized by a trial.
Where they begin to doubt themselves, where they begin to feel like they can't trust any adult or people in the system that are supposed to be here to protect him. So I know that these women have waited a long time to finally be heard and to be believed and to finally have the defendant admit what he did. I do appreciate that he was fairly forthcoming in his plea about what he did. However, it disturbs me that in his written statement that he gave to the Department of Corrections about this, when asked why he did it, his explanation is, I was having a good dream. And I just don't think that that's him taking any responsibility at all. This isn't him having a good dream. We might be confused by that if this was an isolated incident in 2015. But when Ms. Mosier talks about the fact that she woke up for years with him grabbing her by the hips, trying to get his penis up against her buttocks, trying to reach around and touch her private parts, we know that this is a pattern of behavior. This isn't an accident. This wasn't him being confused in the bed, waking up from a good dream and thinking that he was in the bed with an adult woman. This is a man who targets young children and now appears, unfortunately, to go on, at least in 2021, and be physically assaultive to people that he's in an intimate relationship with. So I asked the court, I know that this is a somewhat unique case and that we reached a plea agreement that he pled to an attempted criminal sexual conduct second degree. He certainly has admitted to actually committing that act of criminal sexual conduct second degree, and that's what all of the victim has described here that's happened. This sentence, we agreed on that sentence agreement of 38 to 60 months. I would ask the court to follow that agreement. This is something that the victims are well aware of. That is something that they wanted. They want him to get that much time, but they did not want to have to go through the trial process. It was incredibly important for them actually to not be called liars again by anyone in court and to have the defendant admit what he did. As the court's aware and as we went over at the time of the plea, he has received a substantial benefit by this plea offer, lowering his maximum penalty from 15 years to 5 years, reducing him to no longer have to be wearing a lifetime GPS monitoring tether when he gets out of prison. He will register for the rest of his life as a sex offender. Hopefully that will protect other people. Hopefully he will get sex offender treatment and counseling to try to figure out what happened to him and why he's doing this to other people. But I just asked the court to follow this agreement. And I just want to take a moment to recognize that these are remarkable women that spoke today. These are incredibly difficult things to talk about. These are shameful things that people are told they should keep a secret. None of these were their fault. They do not need to be ashamed for what happened. It is not their fault what happened. They are all amazingly smart, resilient, kind people. And I hope that today and this court process brings them some sense of closure and justice to be able to move forward and to have the type of happiness and trust in their lives that they deserve. Thank you.
Mr. Champion?
Your Honor, everyone in this room that's involved in this case, as far as the non-governmental participants, are victims. I need to point out a couple of things. My client reported this to the police and the accusations of this when this happened. It wasn't the victim. It was my client. It was my client who chose to take this plea agreement against my advice. Looking at the investigation and everything that occurred. What's interesting to me and very sad is everything that has been described by the victims in this case, my client experienced at a young age. The only time anything happened when he was an adult was this single incident. The only time. Everything else started when he was 8 and 9 years old. We brush over that. He started at his path down drug addiction when he was 11 years old. He also was subject to sexual, physical abuse and neglect. Through all of that, he is taking responsibility. He took responsibility in the case and continues. But what he never received was removed from this household. He never received the treatment that he should. To this day, he suffers from mental health issues that are well documented in the pre-sentence report. This is a sad case. And I want the victims to know my client is taking responsibility. So everything that they've experienced, he's experienced and worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Birch, you have the right to make a statement before the court issues a sentence. Is there anything you wish to say today, sir?
Sure.
All right. Thank you. Now we get to the point where the court gets to exercise its discretion in establishing a sentence. I know in the past there were attempts to enter different types of pretrial agreements, and while I know that there may have been arguments for or against those, I took a position that I thought was ethically appropriate, but also would not get any reversal. Because you never know who might be on the bench for an appellate case. Because if you recall, folks, I don't know, some people were disappointed if you recall, there was at least one judge at the time who wrote a 3-page argument that I referenced. And if that judge or one of those other judges who might share that opinion were there, it could come back. So I think I made the right decision to get us to where we're at today. Also, at the time, while I knew what the allegations in this case were, and I knew about some of the prior issues, we never know how a case will turn out. All right. There is extremely a lot to say here, and I will do my best to cover it, to be respectful to both sides, and of course, for the severity of the case. It's often argued that in these cases, there rarely ever is any physical injuries. It's always the testimony, almost always the testimony of the young person who is now a bit older. And people like to say, well, geez, why didn't that person say something? Well, the law has figured this out, that this happens in secret, in dark corners, dark rooms, campers. That's a popular thing here in Michigan. And it survives and continues by people who turn their back and allow it to happen and then don't help the young person. I think it was Miss Moser who said the system failed, or something to that effect. I don't know if it's really so much a system as it's just a situation with multiple people, multiple players. The system really isn't just one part. Maybe Department of Health and Human Services didn't help at some time. Maybe they did or didn't know. Maybe police did or didn't do enough. Maybe a family member did or didn't do enough. However, all those parties, all those agencies and entities operate differently. And maybe the system did work for Miss Moser in the way that I think she appreciates. Because she spoke a lot about her faith and about God putting somebody there for her at that church. Which, by the way, she got to that church, oddly, through her aunt. Thankfully, she had that person at the right time to help her get through things. And her faith, obviously, today is something that stuck out to me a great deal. All right, so somehow, maybe the system is working in the end because the system allows prior acts to be used to show propensity. So the system is set up to help prosecute these cases and acknowledge that there rarely ever is any physical injury and that young people do often choose to remain silent or not know how to handle it. Another thing that we unfortunately see is that it's generational, which, by the way, tells us that it's often kept quiet. And again, happens in secret, happens in dark corners, and it stays in whispers and family and continues from one generation to the next. None of that justifies it, but it does put a different light onto it. The guidelines in these cases are almost always insufficient. When we score guidelines, and here I know that the guidelines were 7 to 23, but the parties agreed to a certain sentence, which I agreed to as well at the taking of the plea. The guidelines and the sentences are woefully inadequate. They cannot be made to be adequate because there's nothing that can deal with the pain that Marcia and Tara deal with every day. There are parts of their lives that we think of average steps in lives they probably never got to enjoy. Things in high school, going to school, finishing school, those tickle feelings and the butterflies in the stomachs when you finally find somebody that you like and you're interested in. But instead, you grew up with a lot of that being stolen from you, and therefore you were nervous and scared a lot. I don't blame you. Those things are the scars that cannot be seen and cannot be scored in sentencing guidelines and cannot be healed by anything that the court is going to do. Always in these cases, whenever we get to sentencing, there's going to be a fact that when you leave, you aren't going to feel remarkably better. Nothing I'm going to say is magical, but hopefully it's an acknowledgement, and hopefully it's a start of a new direction in your life, because now you know that people care, and now you know that the system works to a certain degree, maybe not always as fast as we would like. And then now you are in control. And I'm a firm believer that things don't impact us entirely unless or without our own control. Mr. Birch is not in control of you. He made some really stupid, horrific choices. You are in charge of your own lives. You too get to decide how this impacts you and how you move forward. And I truly, truly hope for the best of you, because you are both worthy. That takes me to the other side. In these instances, and presumably Mr. Birch, maybe by how he was raised or things that happened to him, you were treated as a thing or a toy or as lacking humanity. And that is really horrific. It's not like Mr. Birch was acting on a way to help have fun with two people. He was acting as if you weren't really human. That is horrific. And the fact is, trying to say in his statement, I was having a good dream, is ridiculous, because why would he pursue Marcia back into the house? Why would he stop her from talking to her mom? Why would he invite her the next day? Hoping he was going to have it to the camper again. Hoping he was going to have another good dream? Yeah, that doesn't fly with me at all. The parties have reached an agreement in this case, and I entered into a Cobb's agreement. For those who don't know what that means that at the time of the plea, I already agreed to the sentence because the parties asked me. I do not do Cobb's agreements normally, but I changed that policy for this particular case because the counsel representing the two sides convinced me it was the right thing to do. So we already know what the sentence has to be. And the parties agreed to it. I agreed to it because they said it was the right thing, and because the victims here agreed. Could have been facing up to 15 years. His guidelines could have been higher. And based upon these facts, I probably would have gone to the top of the guidelines. I'm not blaming the prosecutor and defense attorney or anybody else. I'm just trying to highlight for you folks. I truly see this case for what it is. Wish sometimes I could have a magical statement to make everything better. I can't. I never do. This is always where I feel inadequate here. Because I just wish, like Tara, right? Wind back the hands of time. I wish I could make all this never occur, but I can't do that. So the sentence I've already agreed to because the parties have asked me to agree to it, and I will continue to follow that agreement again because they have informed me that that's what the parties want. One thing I will comment on, and I don't mean to pick on Mr. Champion. Yes, this case did come about in a way because Mr. Birch called police. He did that 10 years ago when somebody beat him up after they found out about the allegation. And then after he called, it's not like he admitted to anything. I'm not saying he had to. But it's not like he called and said, hey, I got beat up because I did X. No, he called because he got beat up and saw that moment in time from a very, very selfish position because he didn't see the young girl Miss Mosier as human. I'm sorry, Marcia as human, as anything other than a toy. This case came about because he continued to see the world from a selfish perspective. And then he fled before the charges could be filed. So it's not like this case came about because he turned himself in. Regardless, the sentence of the court is as follows. Court, the defendant to a $68 state minimum fee, $130 crime victims break fund fee, a $300 court cost. Excuse me. The court will not assess any fine, a $300 attorney fee, a $60 DNA fee payable to the Wexford County Sheriff Department. There's no supervision because there's no probation. Restitution will be left open for the next 30 days. That restitution is specifically limited to extradition fees. Court to sentence the defendant as agreed to by the parties and the court at the time of sentencing to 38 months to 60 months. And the defendant has earned 314 days of credit. I don't think I've missed anything. Have I missed anything, Mr. Bennett?
I just believe the judgment to say you must.
Oh, must register as a sex offender correctly. That is set tier three?
Three,
Two,
yes.
three?
Sure.
Three, thank you. All right, Mr. Birch, Mr. Cheney is bringing you 2 copies of one document. You're going to place your initials on one copy. Doing so neither elects nor waives any rights. It merely acknowledges receipt of your copy of the document. This document tells you that you have the right to appeal the conviction.
In the end, the court followed the agreed sentence, 38 to 60 months in prison, lifetime sex offender registration, and formal acknowledgement of harm that can never truly be undone. This case highlights a harsh reality. Sentencing guidelines can't measure lost childhoods, broken trust, or lifelong trauma. But accountability matters. Being believed matters. And today, the victims were finally heard in open court. If you found this case as disturbing and important as we did, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts respectfully in the comments, and subscribe for more in-depth courtroom breakdowns that give victims the voice they deserve.
Sentence in your case today. Because this was based upon a plea of guilty, any appeal must be done by filing an application for leave to appeal. If you choose to file an application for leave to appeal and you want to consider appointing an attorney to assist you, you may complete the bottom half of your copy that you're taking with you and return to the court within 42 days. If you choose not to appeal, you may simply dispose of your copy of the document. Again, folks, I apologize. I wish I could be more eloquent today, but I can't because it hits me as well. I've got children. I have a daughter who means the most to me. So, but I have to, but again, we reached an agreement here with an agreed upon sentence. Because I believe every person can be saved, Mr. Birch, I hope you take advantage of classes. I hope you make right choices. And I don't care what you've said today or what you said inside your statement here where I picked on you saying that you had a good dream. You know what happened. You are in control of fixing yourself, along with the help that the state can give you in prison and even afterwards while you're on parole. I really, really hope that you take advantage of it. Because if something bad has happened to you without going into it too deeply, you're a human being and I want you to fix it. I want you to find faith in whatever you choose or whatever higher power you choose to believe in. And I want you to fix you. And to Tara and Marcia, Sarah, and is the person who hit him that day in the courtroom?
He's not.
No? Right.
Well, Your Honor, for that
anyway,
reason.
Anyways, had that person not gone and assaulted him, what may not have been here. So anyways, good luck to you. Keep your faith. Maybe someday you can reach forgiveness within your heart. Maybe not. That's all up to you. I don't think hatred is something we should all carry because it really weighs us down like anchors and chains. So to you two, best of luck. Which, God, even when I say those words, they sound stupid. I really hope for the best of you all. And that sort of does apply to you. Thank you.